I keep thinking about this storyline, and honestly, the more I sit with it, the more it starts to feel strange in a way that actually fits the messy world of General Hospital. Not neat, not clean, kind of tangled. Like something that should not make sense at first, but then slowly begins to click if you stare at the pieces long enough. So here's the thing about Delilah. People keep asking the same question again and again. Is she alive? Is she dead? Did she really die after the internal bleeding? Or is there some twist waiting behind the curtain? I do not know. Maybe even the writers are still deciding. But in a strange way, that question might not even be the most important one. The bigger one, the one sitting there quietly, is who the father of that baby is. And the spoilers keep teasing it, like they want the audience to look in a certain direction, but not too quickly. Because if you rush to the answer, it feels obvious. Jason? Yes, Jason Morgan. The guy who usually lives inside danger and chaos and gunfire and loyalty. Not exactly the type of man you picture in some hidden father storyline, but that is exactly why it works. It feels accidental, almost ridiculous, which is exactly the kind of thing that happens in Port Charles. I keep remembering that period when Jason was searching for Britt. That whole stretch of time was messy, unpredictable. Jason was moving alone, tracking leads, chasing shadows across different locations. It was not like he had a team sitting in a comfortable office. No, he was traveling, asking questions, following rumors, sometimes probably sleeping in places that were not even safe. And that part matters. Because before Jason finally reached that resort where Jocelyn, Britt, and Vaughn were being held, he must have spent nights somewhere. A lot of nights probably. Think about it. Hotels, cheap motels, bars where strangers come and go, cities where nobody asks questions. A man like Jason, traveling alone like that, carrying stress and frustration and maybe even fear he would not admit out loud. That kind of situation leads to things happening. Not planned things, just moments that slip in when someone is tired and the world feels too quiet. That is where Delilah might come in. Maybe Jason stayed in some place for a couple nights. Maybe it was not even a big city. Could have been a roadside town where the lights look dim and the air smells like cheap alcohol. And somewhere in that town there are women working the night, women who do not ask names because names only complicate things. Delilah could easily have been one of them. And honestly, I can picture it too clearly. Jason sitting alone in a bar, not drinking much, just staring at the table, thinking about Britt and the danger she was in. A woman approaches. Maybe she sees a quiet man with money and no interest in conversation. That is the easiest kind of client. Maybe they barely spoke. Maybe Jason did not even tell her his real name. That would not be surprising at all. Jason Morgan lives half his life avoiding attention. If anything, he probably just paid and followed her to a room upstairs or somewhere close by. And that was it. A moment. A night that meant nothing to him. But sometimes nothing moments become something huge later. Now here is where Jacinda becomes interesting. Because from what I understand, Jacinda and Delilah had some sort of secret connection. Not something obvious. More like a quiet history. Maybe they knew each other from years back. Maybe they worked in the same circles. The same towns where women survive the way they can. It would make sense if they met through that world. Two women doing the same kind of work. Maybe helping each other. Maybe protecting each other when things get dangerous. So if Jacinda knows Delilah, that link alone already pulls the story closer to Port Charles. It is like the universe tying threads together without anyone noticing at first. Now imagine Delilah realizing she is pregnant. That alone is already complicated for someone living that life. She probably met dozens of men. Maybe hundreds over time. Faces blur together, names disappear. One night blends into the next. So when the pregnancy started showing, how would she know who the father was? Maybe she remembered one man slightly more than the others. Quiet, serious, a little different. The one who barely spoke. That could have been Jason, but even then she might not know his name. Just a memory, a shadow. And maybe that is why Delilah came to town later. Not randomly, not by accident. Maybe she was searching. Searching for that man she once met during a strange night months earlier. 7 months pregnant by then. Tired, desperate, hoping maybe she could find him somehow. But fate can be cruel in these stories. Because the internal bleeding happened before she ever found answers. Before she could tell anyone what she knew or what she suspected. Her body gave out before the truth could come out. And that is the tragedy of it. Delilah dies. The baby survives. A tiny girl entering the world too early, too fragile, already carrying a mystery nobody can explain. And that is when the town becomes involved. A premature baby often has complications. Everyone knows that. The doctors would be worried from the start. Breathing problems, blood issues, immune weakness. Anything could happen. Maybe at some point the doctors realize the baby needs something very specific to survive. A tissue match, a donor for something rare, bone marrow maybe, or some other biological match that cannot come from just anyone. But the biggest problem is obvious. Nobody knows the father. Without the father's identity, the chances of finding a perfect match become smaller, so the hospital might begin testing volunteers. People in town who hear about the situation and feel sympathy for a newborn with nobody. Port Charles is strange like that. People fight constantly, betray each other, scream across rooms. But when a baby is in danger, suddenly everyone softens. So they start testing people. Maybe a dozen at first, maybe more. And Jason might end up being one of them, almost by coincidence. Someone mentions the baby needs help. Jason has a strange sense of responsibility when it comes to protecting the innocent. It is part of his character, so he agrees to take the test. No big expectations. Just a quiet attempt to help. The doctor comes back later with surprising news. Jason is a match. That alone would already be unexpected, but doctors do not stop there. Because when compatibility shows up that strong, sometimes they run deeper analysis. DNA patterns, genetic markers, things that reveal more than expected. And that is where the real shock appears. Because the compatibility is not just random. It is patternal. Jason Morgan is the biological father. Imagine that moment. The doctor explaining carefully. Jason sitting there completely still. His mind trying to process something that feels impossible. He never even knew Delilah was pregnant. He probably barely remembered her face. But then memory begins to move slowly inside his mind. A small room somewhere during that search for Britt, a woman whose name he never asked, a night he dismissed as meaningless. Delilah. And suddenly the pieces line up in a way that makes his stomach drop. The baby in the hospital is his daughter. Not a rumor, not a possibility. The actual truth. And I think what makes this storyline powerful is how accidental it feels. Jason did not choose it. Delilah did not plan it. Life just pushed two people into one moment, and months later a child exists because of it. That kind of messy human consequence feels real, even inside a soap opera. Also, there is something ironic here. Jason spent years protecting other people's children, risking his life for families that were not technically his, and now suddenly he discovers he has a daughter he never knew about. A fragile newborn who might only survive because he happened to take a test. It would shake him, I think it would shake him deeply, even if he tries not to show it. Jason is not a man who expresses emotions easily, but fatherhood has always been complicated for him. Think about his history, the life he leads, the danger around him. Suddenly, having a daughter changes the weight of every decision he makes. Another interesting angle is how the town might react. Some people will be supportive. Others might question how this happened. A baby from a woman nobody really knew. A woman connected to the darker side of life. But honestly, that should not matter. A child is a child. Still, gossip spreads fast in Port Charles. And when the story about Delilah's past comes out, about prostitution, about the unknown father who turned out to be Jason, there will be whispers. Some will judge. Some will sympathize. Personally, I think the most tragic part is Delilah never getting the chance to tell her story herself. Maybe she did try to find Jason. Maybe she believed he might help her if she located him. We will never know because the bleeding ended her life too soon. And that leaves the baby with a father who only learns the truth after everything is already over. It is almost cruel timing, but also strangely hopeful. Because if Jason truly is the father, that child might grow up with someone who protects fiercely. Jason may not be perfect. Actually, he is very far from perfect. But when he decides someone is family, he does not walk away. And I think that is where the story could become emotional in ways people do not expect. Jason holding the baby for the first time. Probably awkward. Probably silent. He might not even know what to say. But somewhere inside him, there will be a realization that his life just changed in a way he never planned. A daughter from a forgotten night during a desperate search for Britt. Life is strange like that. One random decision, one small moment, and years later it turns into something enormous. Maybe the writers will reveal the truth slowly. Maybe the audience will figure it out before Jason does. Either way, the clues feel like they are already there. Delilah's secret, Jacinda's connection, Jason's past search for Britt, the mysterious pregnancy, the premature baby. All of it forming one messy chain. And honestly, I kind of like that. Because neat stories are boring. Real stories feel like this. Confusing at first, emotional later, and filled with small human mistakes. that accidentally create new lives. So yes, if I had to guess, I would say the baby is Jason's daughter. Not because the show confirmed it yet, but because the pieces fit too well. And when the truth finally comes out, it will probably hit Jason harder than any enemy ever could. Not a bullet, not a betrayal, just a tiny newborn girl breathing quietly in a hospital bed, waiting for the father she never knew to realize who she is.